Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm your host, and today we're actually doing something a bit different. Usually we look at, the shiny exterior of things, market trends, new technologies, the stuff making headlines.
Right, the flashy stuff.
Exactly. But today we're putting on the mechanics overalls, we're popping the hood of the SAP engine, and really looking at the one specific component that honestly keeps the global economy running.
And I don't think that's an exaggeration at all. I'm excited to be here to talk about this because if this component fails, the literal trucks do not leave the warehouse.
Yeah, and we're talking about the SAP Transport Management System, or TMS, but we aren't just reading the technical manual here. We're looking at this specifically through the eyes of the sales and distribution consultant, the SD consultant.
The people on the front lines.
Exactly. We've got a stack of notes, some dry technical documentation, and a few, let's call them war stories from the field. And our mission today is simple. How do we move an idea from consultant's brain into a live multi-billion-dollar production system without blowing the whole thing up?
And that blowing up part, that is the constant background radiation of an SAP consultant's life. There's this misconception about the job. People think it's just knowing where to click.
Right.
Like, oh, I know how to configure a sales order, or I know how to set up a pricing procedure.
Right. That's just the functional knowledge, the stuff you get certified in.
Yeah, and that is important, obviously. But that's really just entry level. It's table stakes. The thing that separates a junior consultant from a true solution architect, the person you actually trust with the keys to the kingdom, isn't just knowing what to configure, it's knowing how to deliver it.
The delivery mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is the specific skill set of moving that change.
It's kind of the difference between building a car in a factory and actually driving it onto the highway at 80 miles an hour without crashing.
That is a perfect analogy. I mean, you can build the most beautiful, complex, perfect pricing logic in your development sandbox. It can handle taxes in 50 different countries, complex nested discounts, whatever. But if you can't package that logic into a transport request and move it safely through the landscape...
Or worse, if you move it and overwrite something else.
Exactly. If you overwrite something and bring down the entire order entry system, you haven't just failed. You've actually done negative work. You've become a massive liability to the company.
So the stakes are incredibly high. We're talking about the vehicle of change itself. But let me play devil's advocate for just a second here. Is it really that hard? To an outsider, it sounds like just a file transfer. Copy here, paste there.
If only it were that simple. That exact copy-paste mentality is what gets people fired. We're dealing with a massive relational database that has tens of thousands of interdependencies. You pull one tiny thread in the development system, and an entire sweater unravels in production.
Okay, fair enough. Before we even get into the nuts and bolts or the threads and sweaters, I guess we have to clear up the terminology. Because when I say transport to a layman or even to a logistics manager, they immediately think of 18-wheelers.
Oh, I certainly do. I think of shipping, freight costs, bills of lading, all that.
And in SAP, specifically in the SD module, there is a submodule called LE2RA, Logistics Transportation. That is literally about planning physical shipments, hiring carriers, managing trucks. I want to be crystal clear for you listening at home. That is not what we're talking about today.
Right, so no physical trucks with wheels and diesel engines.
No, we are talking about digital boxes. We're talking about the transport request, which you'll hear us refer to as a TR. Think of the TR as a digital shipping container. It's a technical object, specifically a basis object, that you use to package your configuration, your custom code, your table entries.
Is the vessel?
Yeah, the vessel that carries your work from the laboratory of the development system out into the real world.
I really like the shipping container analogy, because in the real world, if you pack a shipping container poorly, like if you put the heavy steel beams on top of the fragile glassware, everything breaks when the ship hits a wave.
That is exactly what happens in SAP. If you pack your transport request poorly, or if you ship the containers in the wrong sequence, the system just crashes.
And reading through these sources, it seems like such a simple binary concept on the surface. Move data from point A to point B. But as I dig into the documentation, I'm seeing hidden landmines everywhere.
It's an absolute minefield.
I mean, we've got terms like cross-client data, which sounds terrifying. We've got generation errors. We've got specific traps with number ranges that can halt a literal factory floor. And then there's this one concept that keeps popping up in the notes, usually in bold red text. The absolute lack of an undo button.
That is the reality that keeps IT directors up at night.
So I want to ask you this directly, just so everyone listening understands the gravity of what we're talking about. If I'm in the production system the live system, and I import a transport that has a mistake in it. Let's say I set the price of a widget to $20 instead of $200. Can I just hit CTRL-Z? Is there a rollback button I can click?
Yeah. No. In SAP production, there is no delete. You cannot right-click a transport and say, oops, didn't mean to do that, revert to previous. The moment that transport hits the system and is imported, the database is updated. The concrete has poured and set.
Wow.
The only way to fix it is to fail forward.
Fail forward. What does that actually look like in practice?
You have to go all the way back to your development system, build a brand new container with the fix, and ship it all the way through the path again to overwrite the mistake. But you cannot simply undo the arrival of that first truck. The database does not have a go back to yesterday feature for configuration.
That sounds incredibly stressful. It sounds like high-stakes poker every time you release something.
It demands a level of discipline that you just don't see in a lot of other software environments.
Yeah.
In modern web development, you often have instant rollbacks. You just spin up the previous container. SAP is different. It's an aircraft carrier. You cannot turn on a dime.
Okay, so if we're going to be piloting this aircraft carrier, we really need to understand the ocean we're sailing in. The source material lays out a very specific landscape. They call it the three-tier architecture. And this seems to be the gold standard across the industry.
It is the absolute standard. If you walk into any major corporation running SAP right now, Coca-Cola, Nike, BMW, whoever, you're going to see this exact structure. You have three distinct systems, usually running on completely separate servers: DEV, QAS, and PRD.
Development, quality assurance, and production.
Right. And understanding the personality, if you will, of each of these environments is the absolute key to surviving as a consultant. Let's start with DEV, the development system.
The birthplace of all the changes.
This is the factory floor. It's messy, it's loud, this is where the consultants live and breathe. But even within DEV, we don't just have one big open warehouse space. We slice the system up into what we call clients.
Yeah, I see that here in the notes. It mentions a golden client, a unit test client, and a sandbox. Why do we need so many subdivisions just to build something? Can't I just build it and test it in the exact same spot?
Think about system hygiene. Let's talk about the golden client first, which is usually numbered something like client 100 or 200. This is the sanctuary. The absolute rule in the golden client is pure configuration only.
What does pure configuration actually mean?
It means you do not run real business transactions there. You do not create a sales order in the golden client. You do not create a fake customer named Mickey Mouse. It is strictly for setting up the underlying rules of the system. The tables, the drop-down menus, the logic.
Why are we so strict about that? Why no Mickey Mouse?
Because this client is the ultimate source of truth. If you start cluttering it up with junk master data or test transactions, eventually you might accidentally attach that junk data to a transport and send it to production. So we keep it pristine. But as you pointed out, if you can't create test data in the golden client, how do you actually know if your configuration works? And that's where the unit test client comes in.
Exactly. Let's say that's client 110. It sits on the exact same physical server, but it's a different logical space, a different partition. You do your pure config in client 100. You save it to a transport request. Then you use a special transaction, usually SCC1, to manually pull a copy of that config into client 110.
So I basically copy my own homework into the next room.
Right. And in client 110, that is where you make the mess. Create Mickey Mouse, create Darth Vader, run 1,000 test sales orders, break things, try to force the system to give you an error. If 110 gets messy, nobody cares. It's the crash test dummy of the landscape.
Makes sense. And where does the sandbox fit into this? I see client 120 listed here.
The sandbox is for when you are totally clueless.
Well, that's reassuring for a highly paid consultant.
No, seriously. Sometimes you get a business requirement and you honestly just don't know the solution right away. Can we use this obscure standard function module? Or what happens if I toggle this weird switch in the pricing procedure? You do not want to do that exploration in the golden client because it creates a transport.
Yes, because once you save a transport there, it's actually kind of hard to cleanly delete the tracks of what you did. You don't want to leave trash or half-finished experiments in the clean room.
You don't want to create a permanent transportable record of your ignorance.
Exactly. So you go to the sandbox, client 120. It's a complete free-for-all. Changes there usually don't prompt the system for a transport request at all. You can try 5 completely different ways to solve a single problem. And once you finally figure out the one path that works, you discard the sandbox work entirely, go back to the golden client, and build it properly, clean and fresh.
I see. So the sandbox is the messy sketchpad. The golden client is the final, pristine blueprint.
Perfectly put.
Okay, so we've built it, we've crash tested it in the unit test client. Now we leave the DEV environment entirely. We move to Tier 2,
Yeah.
QAS, quality assurance.
Now the whole game changes. DEV is about creation. QAS is strictly about verification.
The notes mention that QAS is a mirror of production.
That is a crucial detail. Usually, every 3 to 6 months, the technical basis team will take a full, massive backup of the live production system and completely overwrite QAS with it. So when you are testing your new change in QAS, you aren't testing with Mickey Mouse anymore.
You're testing with real, masked customer data.
Exactly. You're testing with last month's actual sales volumes, real material master data.
So you can see exactly how your shiny new change interacts with the messy, complex reality of legacy data.
Correct. And there is one golden rule for QAS that you absolutely cannot violate.
No direct configuration.
Zero. None. You cannot log into QAS and simply change a price. You cannot change a document type definition. The system is locked at a client level. The only way a change arrives in QAS is via a truck, a transport request coming from DEV.
Now, why is that lock so important? Why can't I just tweak a tiny setting in QAS to get a user acceptance test to pass? I mean, if it's just checking one tiny box.
Because of the "it worked on my machine" syndrome, if you tweak it manually in QAS to make the test pass, you have successfully fixed the environment, but you haven't actually fixed the transport container that's holding your code.
The container's still broken.
Exactly. And then, when you finally move that transport to production next week, the secret manual tweak you made in QAS isn't in there, and the live system breaks. By completely locking QAS, we force you to prove that the transport itself is perfect. The delivery mechanism is being tested just as rigorously as the configuration itself.
That makes total sense. It's a stress test for the package, not just the contents.
Precisely. And finally, after all that, we reach the summit. PROD.
Fort Knox.
The live business. Real money. Real physical trucks. Real invoices going to real customers. If DEV is a playground, PROD is a sterile surgery room. You do not touch anything unless you are scrubbed in, fully authorized, and strictly following protocol.
Now, navigating these three environments seems straightforward enough once you grasp the concept. But the source material highlights a specific distinction that they call vital. And honestly, reading through it, this feels like the area where most junior consultants get their legs blown off.
It is. It's the #1 trap.
The distinction between client-specific data and cross-client data. Can you really break this down for us?
Yeah.
Because to me, looking at a database, data is just data. Why does it matter how it's categorized?
It matters because of the blast radius.
Okay, that sounds appropriately ominous.
Let's look at client-specific data first, which is also called man-and-TT-dependent data. This is most of what a functional SD consultant actually does day to day. Remember we said DEV has clients 100, 110, 120.
Yeah.
If data is client-specific, it lives only in the client you are currently logged into. It's fenced in. For example, if you configure a brand new sales document type, let's call it ZOR, in client 100, and you hit save, client 110 doesn't know it exists yet. Client 120 doesn't know. It is entirely isolated.
It's in a silo. It's safe.
Correct. You have to actively transport it to the other clients to use it. This covers your pricing procedures, your customer master data, your copy controls. This is the safe zone. If you totally mess up in 100, you haven't broken 110.
Okay, I get that. But then we have the other category, cross-client.
This is the danger zone. Cross-client data, or client-independent data, exists at the server level. It sits above the clients.
So it doesn't respect the fences at all.
It ignores the fences entirely. If you change a cross-client object in client 100, you have instantaneously changed it in client 110, client 120, and every other single client that happens to live on that development box.
Wait, instantaneously?
Well,
without doing a transport?
Instantaneously. Without a transport, within that same physical box, the change is global immediately.
Can you give me an example of something in sales and distribution that actually works this way?
The biggest one by far is condition tables. In pricing, you create tables to store your specific prices. Like, you might create a table for a combination of customer plus material. That table's structural definition in the data dictionary is a cross-client object.
Okay, so let's play out a disaster scenario here.
Sure. Imagine you're a junior consultant. You're working away in the sandbox, client 120. You think you're totally safe because you're in the sandbox. You see an old condition table, let's call it table 901, and you think, I don't need this for my experiment. I'm just cleaning up my workspace. You delete table 901.
You're just tidying up the sandbox.
You think so. But Table 901 was actually being actively used by the senior solution architect over in the Golden Client, Client 100, to build out the main project for the quarter.
And because it's cross-client.
You just deleted the architect's entire foundation in real time. He goes to save his work 5 minutes later, and the system screams, "Table not found!"
Oh, wow. That is a resume-generating event.
It's a fist fight in the break room, is what it is. And SAP knows this is dangerous, so the container system actually creates a huge distinction too. Client-specific stuff automatically goes into what's called a customizing request. Cross-client stuff goes into a workbench request.
Ah, so the system actually forces you to use a different type of box, so to speak.
Yes. If you hit save and you
Okay.
see the system prompting you for a workbench request instead of a customizing request, your antenna should immediately go up. You should pause, take your hands off the keyboard, and think, I am touching something that impacts the whole system. Do I really know what I'm doing?
That is a vital safety tip. If it says workbench, check your 6.
Always.
Let's talk about the box itself, the transport request. We've established it's a container. But looking at the technical anatomy provided here, it's not just one big empty cardboard box. It has an internal structure.
It does. If you go into the transaction SE01 or SE10, the transport organizer, you see a hierarchy. It basically looks like a standard Windows folder tree. At the very top level, you have the request header. This is the main shipment. It has a system-generated number like DEVK90001. This top level is usually owned by the lead consultant or the project manager. It's the master container.
And what's inside that folder?
Inside, you have tasks. These are subcontainers, and this is really important for team collaboration. Let's say we are doing a massive Q1 pricing update project. I create the main request, but I'm not doing all the heavy lifting myself. You are doing some of the config, and let's say our coworker is doing some of the ABAP code.
Right, dividing the labor.
Exactly. So inside DEVK 90001, I create a task specifically assigned to your user ID and another task assigned to our coworker. You do your work, and your specific changes get locked exclusively into your task.
So we can actually work in parallel inside the exact same main project container.
Yes. But here's the critical mechanism for release. We cannot ship the main request until every single task inside it has been successfully released by its owner.
The ship literally cannot leave the harbor until all the sailors are on board and accounted for.
Right. So if you finish your work early and release your task, but our coworker goes on a 2-week vacation without releasing his task,
The truck is stuck.
the truck is stuck in the driveway. We physically cannot move the request to QAS. The project manager has to intervene, either taking ownership of the coworker's task to release it, or completely kicking his task out of the request so the rest of it can ship.
This sounds like it causes a significant amount of office politics.
It forces brutal communication. You have to coordinate your go-live dates perfectly. You can't just throw your work over the wall and say, I'm done.
Now, we talked about customizing and workbench requests, but the notes highlight a third type, a strategic tool called the transport of copies, or TC. This sounds a bit more advanced than the basic stuff.
The TOC is the absolute secret weapon of the experienced consultant.
Why? What does it actually do?
Okay, imagine a really long project. We are redesigning the entire rebate structure for a huge enterprise client. This is a 3-month build. We need to test our progress in QAS every single week to make sure we're on the right track. Now, normally, to get things over to QAS to test them, you have to formally release the transport in DEV. But when you release a real transport, it closes permanently. You cannot add any more config to it tomorrow. And even worse, once it's released, it's technically sitting in the queue waiting to go to production.
So if I release it just to test my half-finished work, I've committed myself.
You've created a live bullet. If the basis team accidentally imports the queue to production over the weekend, your half-finished, broken rebate code goes live and destroys the business. You definitely don't want that. You want to test without committing to the final delivery.
Enter the transport of copies.
Exactly. A transport of copies essentially takes the objects from your open, unreleased request, clones them into a temporary secondary container, and ships only that clone to QAS.
Leaving the original perfectly safe and open back in DEV.
It stays open and fully editable. You can keep working on it the next day. And it goes to QAS, you do your rigorous testing, and then it just dies there. It generally does not ever get imported to production. It's a throwaway prototype delivery.
That seems incredibly useful for keeping the production import queue clean and safe.
It's essential. If you look at the import queue of a truly well-run SAP project team, you will see dozens and dozens of 2 keys going to QA every day, but only one final, massive, real transport going to production at the very end of the 3-month project.
That's smart. Really smart. Okay, let's walk through the actual life cycle. I want to visualize the end-to-end movement process. I'm sitting at my desk. I've got my coffee. I'm logged into the DEV system.
Phase 1, creation and locking. You're in the IMG, the implementation guide. You navigate to define a new sales order type. You decide to call it ZEXP for expedited order. You type in the new description. You hit save.
And this is where the pop-up appears on the screen.
The prompt for transport. Now, you have to create the request, and I cannot stress this enough to anyone listening. Naming conventions.
The notes strongly suggest a format. Module, ticket number, description.
Please follow this. If you name your transport my config or fixing stuff, you are a sociopath.
Strong words, but I get it.
6 months from now, when the system crashes on a Tuesday night at 2 a.m., and we are staring at a list of 500 transports trying to desperately find the one that touched the pricing logic, we need to be able to scan the names quickly. SD, INC 1055, update pricing. Boom. I know exactly what module, what help desk ticket, and what the business purpose is. If it's named Dave's Fix, we are completely blind.
So I name it properly, module, ticket, description, I hit save.
Now, the lock engages. This is a hard database lock. The moment you save ZEXP inside your transport, no one else in the entire development system can touch the configuration for ZEXP.
It's mine.
It is entirely yours. If another consultant tries to modify ZEXP, they get a hard error message at the bottom of the screen. Object locked by user host in request XYZ.
Which prevents us from accidentally overwriting each other's work before we even release it.
Correct. It completely prevents code collisions.
Okay, so I've built it. I've moved it to the unit test client using SEC1. I've tested it. It works beautifully. Now we hit phase 2, release.
You go to the transport organizer, you find your request in the tree, you click the specific icon. It literally looks like a little delivery truck.
I do love that SAP is so literal with their icons.
Very German, very literal. You release the task first, your subcontainer, then you select the main request and click the truck again to release that. When you click that truck on the main request, the system does something really interesting behind the scenes. It doesn't just flag it as done, it essentially zips up the data.
Zips it up like a file archive.
Exactly. It extracts all the relevant table entries and code from the relational database and writes them to a flat file on the actual operating system of the server. In a specific folder called SAPSDTOP50, it creates a binary file, the data file, and a text file called the co file, which tells the target system how to unpack it.
So it physically leaves the SAP database layer and becomes a file on the hard drive of the server.
Yes. And then the system automatically registers that file into the import queue of the target system, which is QAS.
The package has officially left the building.
Mm-hmm.
It's now sitting out at the loading dock of QAS.
Phase 3. Import into QAS. Now, in most big companies, you, the functional consultant, don't actually have the security authorization to press the import button. You have to put in a ticket and ask the basis team, the system admins, to do it. But you need to watch the result like a hawk.
And we get a scorecard after they run it, the return codes.
This is your final report card. You are desperately hoping for an RC0.
A perfect 0.
That means total success. Nothing went wrong. Sometimes you might get an RC4. That's a warning. Usually it just means I imported the data fine, but I had a little trouble generating a screen layout, or this minor warning occurred during activation. Usually the core data is fine, you should definitely check it, but it's rarely a showstopper.
And then the dreaded RC8.
The RC8 ended with errors. This means the import actively failed. The truck crashed into the loading dock and caught fire.
What typically causes an RC8?
90% of the time. Dependencies. You tried to import the roof of the house, but the walls weren't there yet.
A missing object.
Exactly. You transported a pricing procedure that relies on a brand new condition type you built, but you completely forgot to include the condition type in the transport. The system tries to build the procedure in QAS, looks around for the condition type, can't find it anywhere, panics, and aborts the import.
And if you get an RC8, what do? Do you just tell bases to try running it again?
Never. Just try again. Doing the exact same thing twice won't magically fix a missing object. You have to stop. Open the transport log. Investigate the specific error message. Find out exactly what was missing. Go back to DV. Create a brand new transport containing only the missing piece, send that piece first, and then re-import the failed one.
Order of operations is literally everything.
It is the absolute physics of the system.
And there's one more code listed here, right? RC12.
If you see RC12, take a breath because it's probably not your fault. That means critical system failure. The hard disk is completely full, the network cable was physically cut, the database crashed during the write process. That is a call the fire department situation for the basis team. You just step back.
Good to know when it's out of my hands. And finally, if everything goes well and we get an RC0, we move to phase 4, import to PRD.
Which brings us right back to the start of our conversation, the no undo reality.
Let's really dig into crisis management. Because no matter how good you are, no matter how many checklists you have, eventually you will move something to production that is wrong.
It happens. You're human. The business changes its mind at the last second, or a bug slips through UAT.
The notes outline a very specific counter-transport method. Walk me through this process. I've just accidentally moved a configuration that completely breaks pricing. Customers are checking out online and getting billed $0 for a $1,000 item. The phone on my desk is ringing. The CIO is pacing. What do I do?
First, do not panic. If you panic, you start hacking at the system. You start looking through STMS for ways to delete the transport from the PROD queue. That is entirely useless. The data is already written to the live tables.
So don't fight the queue.
Do not fight the queue. You have to outsmart the system using its own rules. Step 1, go immediately back to DEV, into the golden client. Step 2, manually change the configuration back to the correct state. Set that price logic back to how it was yesterday. Step 3, save this correction into a new transport.
Okay, so I'm creating a new box.
Yes, and you should name it extremely clearly so Basis knows it's an emergency. SD urgent fix rollback pricing. Step 4, release this new TR immediately. Step 5, call Basis and ask them for an emergency import. Have them push this specific transport through QAS and straight into PRD, bypassing the normal schedule.
So you're essentially chasing the bad truck down the highway with a good truck.
Exactly. You are overwriting the error with the correct data. That is the only valid way to undo anything in SAP. You have to move forward to go back.
That requires a very cool head. It feels like it takes so much longer than just hitting a delete button, but I see why it's the only path.
It takes maybe 15 minutes if the whole IT team is aligned and communicating, but I promise you, those 15 minutes feel like an absolute lifetime when the business is losing money.
I can imagine. Now, talking about things that go wrong, the source material has a dedicated section called the minefield. These aren't just simple typos or logic mistakes. These are structural traps built into SAP that catch even senior people off guard.
Oh, yes. These are the classics, the initiation rights.
The first one listed is number ranges. The notes have a giant, all caps, do not transport warning on this. Why?
Because this is the most common, most reliable way to stop a billion-dollar business dead in its tracks.
Explain the mechanism behind that. How does it stop the business?
Okay, think about how SAP generates document numbers. A number range is basically just a database counter. Every single time you create a new sales order, the system looks at the counter, grabs the next available number, say 1001, and increments the counter to 1002. It stores that current number status directly in a database table.
Makes perfect sense.
In PROD, your live system, you are creating thousands of orders every single day. Your counter is probably up to, say, 500,000. But in DEV, you barely create any orders. You just do a few tests. Your counter in DEV is probably sitting at, like, 50?
Oh, I see where this is going.
If you put the number range object into a transport request in DEV, you aren't just capturing the rule definition like start at 1, end at 999,999. You are actively capturing the current status. You are putting a number 50 into the box.
And when that transport eventually hits production,
it aggressively overwrites the live production counter of 500,000 with the number 50.
and the next time a live customer tries to buy something online.
The system confidently tries to assign order number 51 to their purchase. But order number 51 was already created 3 years ago. It already exists in the database.
Duplicate key error.
Massive crash, short dump. And it will keep crashing for every single new order, shutting down global sales until you figure out what happened, log in, and manually fix the counter back to 500,000. But guess what? You probably didn't write down what the exact number was before you overwrote it.
That is an absolute nightmare. So the golden rule is create the number range in DEV so you can do your testing, but never, ever put it in a transport box.
Never put it in the box. When you are ready to go live with a new company code or document type, you log into PROD directly. The transaction VN01 is usually left open by security specifically for this exact reason. You create the number range intervals manually in PROD. It's so much safer. It's cleaner.
Is there ever a valid exception to this rule?
Technically, yes. If you are doing a massive global rollout, like 50 countries at once, hundreds of different number ranges you can transport them, there is a specific menu button in the number range screen to include them, but you have to manually create a workbench request for the object NRIV, and you have to be surgically careful to uncheck the current status flags before you release it. But for daily support work, just do it manually. It takes 30 seconds, a transport takes 20 minutes, and carries a massive risk.
Safety first, always. Okay, moving to scenario B in the minefield. VOFM routines. Right. In SD pricing, sometimes the standard out-of-the-box configuration just isn't enough. You have the client who needs a custom mathematical formula to calculate a really complex local tax or a tiered discount. So you get an ABA developer to write a custom routine, say routine 901, in transaction VOFM.
And the classic problem is you test it, it works perfectly in DEV, you release the transport, it imports cleanly into QAS, and then nothing.
It just stops working.
It either ignores the new formula completely, calculating the wrong price, or gives you a terrifying short dump on the screen, and the consultant is sitting there screaming, "But I transported it! I checked the object list, the code is there!"
So what actually happened?
VOFM routines are literal snippets of ABA code. When they arrive in the target system via a transport, they arrive as inactive text. They are basically just words printed on a page. They are not executable, compiled programs yet. They need to be actively generated.
Does the transport process not do that automatically during the import?
It tries to. It really does. But with VOFM routines specifically, the SAP architecture is notoriously unreliable. It very often fails to trigger the background generation program for those specific objects.
So what is the fix? How do you wake the code up?
There is a magic spell. A specific ABAP report. Write this down if you're listening. RV80HGEN.
RV80HGEN.
It stands for Regenerate VOFM. You go into transaction SE38 in the target system QAS, and later PROD immediately after the import finishes. You execute this exact report. It takes about 10 seconds to run. It scans through all the pricing routines, output routines, copy requirements, and forcefully compiles them all into active code.
It wakes them up.
It wakes them all up. Suddenly, you go back to your sales order, hit update pricing, and it works perfectly. It is a mandatory part of the standard cutover checklist for any SD go live. If you have routines, you run the report, no exceptions.
Scenario C condition tables. We touched on this earlier with the cross-client warning, but let's be really specific about the trap here.
Yeah, right. Transaction V03. You create a table to hold pricing records, like customer and material combinations.
The real nuance here seems to be the dangerous mixing of object types within pricing.
Yes. The access sequence, the search strategy that actually uses the table to find the price, is a customizing object. It's client-specific. But the table itself, the structural definition in the database, is a workbench object. It's cross-client.
And the risk highlighted here is deletion.
If you delete a condition table in DEV, you aren't just removing a config entry, you are actively dropping a structural table from the entire database.
Right.
If you put that deletion into a transport and move it to PRD, and any pricing procedure out there is still trying to look at that table, massive system dump. Table not found. The system panics because the pricing map says go look in table 901, but table 901 simply does not exist on the hard drive anymore.
So the lesson is, never delete condition table unless you have done an exhaustive check and are 100% sure it is removed from every single access sequence in every single environment.
Honestly, I just never delete them. Ever. I rename the description to "Do not use obsolete" in capital letters. It is infinitely safer to leave a tiny empty ghost table sitting in the database than to risk blowing up the live pricing engine.
That is extremely practical advice. Scenario D, table maintenance. This is actually about avoiding transports entirely, right?
Exactly. Sometimes you have a business requirement to change certain data in PROD every single day. The classic example is currency exchange rates, table OB08. You cannot force the finance team to create an IT ticket and a transport request every single morning just to update the euro to dollar conversion rate.
That would be absolute bureaucracy hell. The business would grind to a halt.
So SAP provides a backdoor. It's a transaction called SOBJ. You can find the specific table object and flag it as current settings. This tells the SAP kernel, hey, allow this specific table to be maintained directly by end users in production, even though the rest of the client is completely locked down against changes.
And what if we built a custom table? A Z table to hold, say, seasonal discount thresholds.
If you built a custom Z table, when you generate the table maintenance screen for it in transaction SE55, there is a specific radio button section called recording routine. You can set it to standard recording, which will aggressively ask for a transport request every time you hit save, or you can set it to no or use a recording routine.
And if you choose no,
It stops asking for a TR completely. You can assign a transaction code to that table, give it to the business users, and they can edit the thresholds in PROD freely. But you have to be careful. You never want to do this for core configuration tables, only for master data or highly volatile daily data.
right, you do not want users changing fundamental business rules or document types on the fly.
Exactly. It's a tool you use very sparingly.
Let's transition to troubleshooting. You mentioned RC8 earlier, the dreaded error code. Let's talk about how to actually decode it when it happens.
The error log is your best friend, even if it initially looks like you're reading the matrix code. The most common difficult error is the generation error.
This typically happens when you change massive core tables, right?
Yes. Let's say you have a requirement to add a custom field to the main sales order item table, VBAP. In DEV, that table is tiny. You append the field, hit activate, and it takes 1 second. But in PROD, VBAP probably has 50 million rows of historical data.
And when you import that tiny structural change,
The import process tries to physically activate the new table structure. This involves the database having to potentially touch or adjust the schema for 50 million rows. This takes a significant amount of processing time.
and if the server has a timeout limit setting,
If the server is configured to time out any background process after 10 minutes, and the massive database update takes 20 minutes, the process gets violently killed by the operating system, RC8, and now your core VBAP table is stuck in a partially active state. It's broken, and nobody can create an order.
so how do you avoid that trap?
For massive structural table changes, you never just toss it in the normal queue and cross your fingers. You coordinate closely with the basis team. They might need to run the activation manually in the background using specific tools, or they might mandate doing it during a scheduled weekend downtime window when no users are on the system.
Let's synthesize this into best practices. We've covered all the horror stories. How does a true pro actually manage their transports?
Sequence is king. We kept mentioning the building a house analogy. You must transport in the exact chronological order of creation.
What's the specific hierarchy?
1. Data elements and domains, the absolute basic bricks. 2. Tables and structures, the walls. 3. Basic configuration, the electrical wiring. 4. Dependent configuration, like assigning a procedure to a sales area, the light fixtures. And 5. Application ABIT code, the light switch.
Because if you move the light switch before the wiring is installed,
It does absolutely nothing, or it shorts out. Sequence is non-negotiable.
another best practice highlighted here.
Yeah.
Piggyback.
This is a huge temptation that everyone faces, especially when they're busy. You have a transport already open for a minor pricing bug fix. Then, your boss calls and asks you to create a brand new sales order type for a new product line. You think to yourself, I'll just put the new sales order type config into the exact same transport box it's already open.
It saves time, right? One truck to track instead of two.
Until the pricing bug fix fails its testing in QAS. The business says, this pricing is wrong, don't move it to PROD. Now, you cannot move your shiny new sales order type to PROD because it is physically held hostage in the failed transport container. Or, conversely, the pricing fix is an emergency that needs to go live tonight, but the sales order type hasn't been tested at all. Now you're totally blocked.
So the rule is rigidly keep them separate. One logical business change per transport.
Always. 2 completely separate requests for 2 unrelated changes. It saves you so much pain.
But what if I have a massive project? I might have 10 small transports for one big rollout. Moving them one by one into PROD sounds really risky for getting the sequence wrong. I might accidentally import transport number 7 before number 6.
That brings us to the strategy of merge wisely. In SE01, you can go up to the menu bar, go to Utilities, and select Merge Requests. You can actually take those 10 small sequential TRs and combine all their objects into one massive golden transport right before moving it to QAS for the final integration test.
That absolutely ensures everything arrives together in the right structural order.
Exactly. You bundle them all up securely right before the final shipment.
And finally, validation. Before you confidently email the business and say, it's fixed, test it, you need to check the transport itself.
Open the request in SE01, double-click the task level, look at the Object List tab.
What specifically am I looking for there?
If you configured a pricing procedure, you should see an entry like VVT683. If you created new condition types, you should see T685A. You're verifying the database tables were captured. But the biggest tip, the thing that catches juniors every day. If that object list tab is completely empty, you didn't actually save the config.
Oh, that would be so embarrassing. Moving a totally empty box to production and declaring victory.
It happens way more often than you'd think. You thought you saved it, but you actually backed out of the screen without confirming. The transport container was created, but it's empty. You ship it, tell everyone it's done, and absolutely nothing changes in the system.
Also, the notes mentioned for custom Z reports. If you wrote code, you need to manually check for include files and text elements.
Yes, a super common rookie mistake. You transport the main source code of the program, but you forget to include the text elements, which are the translation strings for the column headers. So the report runs in PROD, the math is perfect, but all the column titles at the top of the screen are completely blank.
That is a dead giveaway of a rushed, unprofessional job.
We're coming to the end of our deep dive here. Let's hit the final checklist for a successful end-to-end move. I'll read the step, you confirm the underlying nuance.
Go for it.
Step 1. Config saved in DEV.
Check. And verify your object list isn't empty.
Step 2. Unit test passed in DEV, usually client 110.
Essential. Do not ever blindly trust your own typing.
Step 3. Task released, then the main request released.
Strictly in that order. Don't leave your coworkers' tasks hanging open.
Step 4. Dependencies checked.
Are the foundational walls built before the roof arrives in the queue?
Step 5. Import to QA.
Watch the return codes closely. Accept RC0 or RC4 only. Investigate RC8 immediately.
Step 6. Run RV80HGEN in QA if formulas or routines are used.
Cast the magic spell. Wakes up the code.
Step 7. UAT signed off by the business.
Get it in writing or an official email. Someone saying, yeah, looks fine, and the hallway is not enough to risk the system.
Step 8. Import to PRD.
Only during the formally approved IT change window. No rogue daytime imports.
Step 9. Run RV80HGEN in PRD.
Again, the magic spell has to be cast freshly in every single target environment.
And step 10. Smoke test in PROD.
Log in as a user. Open a sales order. Make sure it doesn't immediately short dump. Just because the technical import log said success doesn't mean the business process actually functions.
Fantastic. Now, as is our tradition on the deep dive, we want to leave you, the listener, with a provocative thought, something to really chew on and research on your own. The source material suggests a very specific disaster recovery scenario.
Right. We talked about generation errors earlier. Imagine you modified an SD user exit, specifically the infamous MV45AFZZ.
The absolute holy grail of all SD user exits, it touches everything.
It includes custom code that executes every single time any user saves a sales order globally. You modify it, you transport it, but it has a tiny syntax error that you somehow missed, maybe a missing period at the end of a line. When it hits PROD, it causes a massive generation error for the entire core sales order program, SAP MV45A.
And since that main program controls the entire sales order screen interface,
suddenly, no one in the entire world can create or change a sales order. The transaction VA01 simply throws a short dump for every single user. The business is totally dead in the water.
that is a total terrifying standstill.
The question for you to mull over is, how exactly do you troubleshoot and resolve that when the system is effectively screaming at you? You can't just quickly transport a fix from DEV because the import queue itself might be gridlocked behind the generation error. Do you know how to leverage emergency authorizations to open the ABAP editor directly in PROD to comment out the bad line of code just to stop the bleeding? Do you know how to use the unconditional mode 2 in STMS to force a transport through a stuck queue?
That's the real test. Mastery of the transport management system is not just about happily moving things along the sunny path. It is about knowing exactly what levers to pull when the main artery of the business is severed and everyone is panicking.
Absolutely. It's about maintaining grace and technical precision under extreme pressure.
Well, thank you for guiding us through the minefield today. I know I learned a lot.
My pleasure. Drive safe out there in the landscape.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in to this deep dive. Double-check your object lists, rigorously keep your queues clean, never transport a number range, and we will see you on the next one.